Hi there, and welcome to Hearthside. My name's Michelle. I'm the writer of this blog, and I'm currently working on making video versions of all my blog posts with the intention of making them more accessible to different people and easier to engage with my content. A lot of these are just me reading from them or paraphrasing what's already there. I might add a little bit if I've changed my opinion slightly, or just if it was like specific to whatever year that I was doing. The current one that I am looking at is called Freyja, Fire, Brísingamen, and Other Musings. So I've been doing a lot that are sort of like talking about different figures in the lore, and it seems like these ones are really popular. I kind of feel like they're a cop-out, to be honest, because anyone can read the lore, anyone can interpret the lore, and whether or not that's got any amount of accuracy, I mean, that's up to you to decide. I find these ones are not really my favorite post to make, but sometimes I have an idea that I like to write about for one of them and then end up posting them, but they definitely get the best reception a lot of the time. So this one, I am talking about Freyja more generally, and also her association with fire, or does she have one at all, is basically what I was saying. So I think the problem with the image of Freyja is that a lot of sources, when they were interpreting her through a Christian lens, were seeing Freyja as sort of a Nordic Aphrodite, and just sort of seeing her as the goddess of love or possibly lust and beauty. And I think that Freyja is a much more complicated figure than that, and that's oversimplifying, and it's just a way of dismissing female power, basically, and minimalizing the goddesses, just the same as how Freyja and Frigg are often seen as being the same goddess. I think that is inaccurate, and they're trying to take away the power of the goddess as a figure within various different pagan religions, not just our heathen faith. So yeah, that's where I'm going with that. A lot of the times Freyja is portrayed in material that we have as being sort of a lustful sorceress with no moral compass, or a prize to be won by men. And Frigg often is seen as basically just out and stay-at-home housewife, and I think that those are terribly inaccurate. So yeah, I'm focusing in this article mostly on Freyja. I don't really want to get into the argument about whether Freyja and Frigg are the same goddess, but I have probably already made my opinion fairly clear on that anyways. So Freyja is really complex. So she is the goddess of love and beauty, but also war and death, magic, treasure, and fertility. And I think in a lot of ways Freyja represents the autonomy of women. And I feel like even more than when I wrote this, that's a very important topic to be talking about right now. It seems like there's been a lot of effort to weaken her power over the centuries with the Christianization. And I think that even with all of that, like, it hasn't really been successful. Even when you're reading the literature closely, you'll see that she's the one who seems to choose her own fate. She chooses who she loves and she chooses who she has sex with, and she also gets to choose half of the battle slain. And she's often seen giving her opinions in public among the Aesir and is respected for that. The Aesir don't dare to force her to marry against her will, even when they think of that as a way to get things that they want. When she says that she won't, then they do things. They make Thor dress up as her to trick the Jotun, and the same with the story with the giant builder. Loki also turns into a mare in order to stop the builder from being successful, instead of Freyja having to marry him. So I'd say Odin and the other gods respect her enough to see that her opinion is important, and Odin respects her enough to seek her out and try to learn Seder from her. I think in some ways, like, if we were going to suggest that Freyja was the same as another goddess in the lore, there's potentially room to say that her and Gulvig might be the same figure, but I mean, there's not enough on Gulvig in the lore, I think, for us to completely make that conclusion. But definitely we see that they're both associated with magic, and they are both very strong-willed women. And the name Freyja just means lady, so whether that's actually her name or a title, to me is unclear. And I almost wonder if that itself was an erasure within the lore, where they removed her name to try to remove her power, basically. So I think Freyja is a goddess who has a lot of traits that heathen women should aspire to emulate. So she is her own person, she's loyal to her tribe, and capable of living peaceably with other tribes. But she holds her own counsel and is not willing to be untrue to herself just to please others. And she knows women's wisdom, and that knowledge gives her empowerment. She has agency over her body, her mind, and her voice. I think that that's really something that is worth looking at, like, especially right now with all the things going on in the world. And yeah, she's just like a really powerful figure that I think a lot of women and even men could learn from. So I think it's kind of ridiculous. Like, the church tries to basically slut shame her to reduce her power, and it seems like it's having the opposite effect. So, like, Freyja will sleep with a lot of men, but she has every right to, as does every other woman. And women having sex should not be considered a shameful act. It's a doubled standard that men can sleep around and women are seen poorly if they do, basically. So I think, like, seeing such a powerful woman who's able to make those sorts of choices for herself, that is something that women need to see, and an image that we don't have enough of in our current culture. Women having agency over their bodies is powerful, and the idea that women should see that as a bad behavior. That's an antiquated idea. The only reason why women over the past few centuries are told to feel ashamed of sleeping around is basically to avoid pregnancy, but that's completely ignoring the contribution of men to that same act. And just because the woman's body is the one that gets pregnant doesn't mean that she should be the only one responsible. So it's okay for a woman to have multiple partners. It's okay for a woman to get pregnant, and it's okay for a woman to raise children with a partner or as a single mother. And we need to realize that there's a lot of diversity in what it's okay for a woman to do, and we shouldn't respect a woman any less for her choices. So that's what Freyja represents. She's the pure feminine energy, without any expectations laid upon it. She is woman, and she commands both life and death. She has magic that is not understood by men and that scares them, and that is what her power is. So that's the broad strokes about Freyja, and then I'm looking more closely at Freyja and her necklace and her association with fire. So her necklace was made by the Brísingamen dwarves, and she slept with all 4 of them as payment for it. And we know that the necklace is extremely valuable, but it's not really explained why that is in the story or in what way it's valuable. It's believed that this necklace is made out of gold or amber, or possibly a combination of the two. And so Freyja has been associated with both of these metals or gems. It's also believed that Freyja's tears were made out of gold. And when they fell into the sea, that they became amber. So the same associations over again. And Freyja's 2 daughters, Nos and Yersemi, both of the names have to do with treasure. So here's where we get to talking about how Freyja could be also Gullveig, because Gullveig, the meaning is gold drunk or possibly gold strength, which seems like a kenning for Freyja given her associations with gold. We know that she's a sorceress who was burned 3 times and reborn, so that seems very similar to Freyja, who we know is a sorceress. And we also know that Gullveig was not of the Aesir tribe, and neither was Freyja initially, and that the Aesir were not knowledgeable in magic and somewhat fearful of it. So it seems like there's a lot of parallels between these 2 figures. And I think it's important to then look at Freyja's family to understand the things that she's associated with. So her brother Freyr is associated with fertility, and so they both are. They're also both associated with the symbol of the boar, and both of the boars, Gullinbursti, the golden boar, which Freyr rides, and then Freyja's golden bristled boar. They seem like they complement each other just the way that Freyr and Freyja are complementary forces of both frith and strife, fertility, death, and rebirth. So there's like this same transformational energy flowing through all of it, and you can't really fully picture Freyja without Freyr, because they're brother and sister. There's so many things that are similar about them. And then if we look at their father Njord, who's the god of the sea, it seems a little bit disjointed at first. But I think it has complete relevance when you think about Freyja and her tears falling into the sea and becoming amber. But then you're looking at Freyja and we're thinking, well, is she associated with fire? Her father is a god of the sea. But it seems like, yes, there is a tentative yes there. We know that women are often associated with the hearth, and in that way, all the goddesses are associated with hearthfire to some extent. And even though Freyja is not the type of figure who wants to sit by the fire, do what she's told, and not be out there in the world, she's out there in the sphere of men, talking to them as equals and acting as equals. But there's still this fieriness about her, this warmth, and I think that comes right back to her and her association with this necklace, the Brísingamen. If we look at the Nordic Old Norse roots, Brísingr, it means fire or amber. And so the dwarves, they crafted this with fire. They are fire dwarves in some sense. So she's wearing the fire neck ring or the fire necklace. And when she's crying tears, they fall into the sea as amber. Is that like she's crying tears of gold? She's crying tears of fire. She's crying tears of warmth. There's just like so many things going on there. It's like hard to almost keep them straight. And I feel like that's the case with a lot of the stories in the lore. Like each time you look at it, there's another layer and another layer. And it's a new story each time depending on where you are sitting with it when you come back to it. We should also look at some of the other kennings that are associated with Freyja. So Mardal, it means light of the sea. So it's like the sunlight that dances on the waves. She's the beauty of the ocean. The fire of sunlight dancing. It's her warmth and her passion. And it's the beauty that makes her strong. There's so many associations with fire and gold and amber that just sort of keep repeating themselves. The idea of warmth, the sparkles of sunlight, the fire that burns and stirs strife, but also the fire of passion and the force of will, the beauty and warmth of life-bringing, the life-bringing force of womanhood. And of course, there's always the darker side to it. There's the magic and the death, and there's always a dark side to fire, to the destruction that comes with fire as well as creation. So the fire is her lustful passion, but also her words that burn those that she scorns. And these are all things that you could think about, the associations with women historically, and even now, like how we see women, their words have so much power, and the word of a woman historically could damage your reputation. If the lady of the hall spoke out about someone, then that would change the way that those around would see that person. The fire in Freyja is the essence of womanhood. Her fire is the torch that lights the way for other women to follow. And Freyja's fire tears are tears of passion. When Loki makes Freyja angry, then her throat swells and her fire necklace bursts. That's the most powerful image of rage being projected out at Loki. And it really just, like, that passion, it's this burning, burning passion. And that's her essence in many ways. So yeah, I would say Freyja is associated with fire, but fire in a metaphorical sense. The fire is the combination of her traits, her beauty, her lust, her satyr, and the associations with fertility and with death, her passion. All of these things are that fire. It's like a kenning or metaphor, I would say. So it's all of her emotions, her love, her anger, her heartbreak, everything is that burning inside of her, the fire that represents her being. And her being from the Vanir tribe and being associated with gold and amber, and that it adorns her hall in the imagery, in the lore, the shining of sunlight on water, and that it radiates out, affects all of those who are around her, and they all can feel that warmth and that burning, depending on how it's directed at them. The fire is the essence of a woman who knows what her worth is. So that one I got a little bit poetic, but I think that it drives home the point that I was trying to make. It's really unfortunate to me that a lot of the goddesses have been completely written out of the lore. We have a fair amount on Freyja and a fair amount on Frigg, but for the most part, like, goddesses that we think should be pretty important, for example, Sif, there's almost nothing. So it's really nice when we have enough that we can actually build a pretty firm argument like this. So that's that one, and I hope that that one sits with you, especially with everything that's going on in the world right now. And yeah, until next time, we'll see you then.